Snow was falling in the top left-hand corner of Wales. Flakes the size of old pennies floated gently from the dark grey sky and laid themselves carefully on the ground. There was so much of it. The little town of Llaniog, high in the hills, was quite covered. The roads were blocked. The railway was blocked. People dug paths from door to door, but the snow soon covered them again. Ivor the engine was snug and warm in his shed on the siding. So were the sheep, who'd come down off the hill to warm themselves by his boiler. In fact, there were sheep everywhere in the town. They huddled in the high street and clustered around Eli the baker's shop, where the smell of new baked bread floated out among the snowflakes. Eli the baker was a very worried man. The storeroom where he kept his flour was usually full to the ceiling with flour bags. But now it was empty. He had used up all the flour. He put on his overcoat and scarf and tramped out into the snow. On the way, he met Mr. Davis the grocer and Mrs. Williams the sweet shop. "What are you out of, then?" asked Eli. "Everything," replied Mr. Davis. "Rice, treacle, butter, jam, biscuits, potatoes, you name it, I haven't got it. My shop is almost empty." "So is mine," sighed Mrs. Williams. Guy Station, the station master, and Jones the Steam, the engine driver, sat in the booking office at Llaniog Station with their feet up on the stove, drinking tea. There came a knock at the door. It opened, and in came a lot of cold air, some snowflakes, Eli the baker, Mr. Davis, and Mrs. Williams. "What's this?" asked Guy Station. "There are no tickets or trains today." "No flour," said Eli. "No potatoes," said Mr. Davis. "No bullseyes," said Mrs. Williams. "Oh, yes," said Guy Station. "What are you going to do about that, then?" "There's nothing we can do," growled Eli. "The flour is waiting at Grumbly Town for Ivor to collect as usual. Until it comes, we shan't have any more bread." "Or potatoes," said Mr. Davis. "Or jelly babies," said Mrs. Williams. "Oh, there's tragedy now," said Jones. "What shall we eat?" "We shan't eat. We shall starve," explained Eli the baker. "Unless you and Ivor go to Grumbly and collect the goods." "But the snow is deep on the line," said Jones the Steam. "We would never get through without a snowplow." "Then get a snowplow," said Eli the baker firmly, and went home. Well, of course, Eli the baker was quite right. The only thing to do was to get a snowplow. Jones the Steam and Guy Station took their feet off the stove, finished their tea, and went to see Bynum the smith. "Snowplows, is it?" said Bynum Smith thoughtfully. "I've no idea what snowplows look like. So I suppose I shall just have to invent one. It would be a sort of double sideways shovel, I expect. Something like this, perhaps." Bynum Smith took a piece of burnt wood from the forge and drew on the wall. "A bolt here at the back, look, and a bracket over Ivor's buffers of 2-inch angle riveted plates." Once Bynum Smith is busy inventing something, there's no point in standing about. He was still drawing and talking to himself as Jones and I walked back to the station. Jones the Steam went on down to the shed to see to Ivor's fire and tell him about the snowplow. Bynum Smith did not waste time. He hammered and thumped and welded sheet and angles and bars of steel in his forge, and by midday he was to be seen dragging a strange implement over the snow like a sledge. He bolted it onto Ivor's front end, over the buffers. It fitted very well. "Go on, Ivor," said Bynum. "Take a run of the snow." Jones the Steam opened Ivor's regulator as wide as it would go, and Ivor fairly charged at the deep snow. The snowplow dug its point in and threw the snow up each side of the line in a great shower. "Keep going, Ivor!" shouted Bynum Smith as he jumped onto the step. Ivor kept going and carved a clean path through the snow up to Llaniog Station. There they coupled up 2 trucks and were ready to go to Grumbly. "Shall we try it then, Ivor?" asked Jones. "Boop, boop," went Ivor's whistle. scrunch, slurps went the snow as it was hoisted up and thrown aside by the snow plough. "Keep pushing, Ivor!" shouted Vinyl Smith and Ice Station as they disappeared down the line. The snowdrifts lay thick on the sides of the hills, but Ivor charged into them and split them like meringues. "Keep pushing, Ivor!" shouted Jones the Steam. But Ivor needed no encouragement. His fire was burning well, his steam pressure was high, his pistons were puffing powerfully, and the snow was leaping up and away on each side of them. He was enjoying himself. It was a glorious sight. Even the sun came out to see, and lit the mountains with shafts of light that glittered on the snow and ice like golden fire. Soon they came to Grumbly Town. Jones closed the regulator, and they rolled quietly into the snow-covered station. "Are you there, Mr. Thomas?" shouted Jones the Steam. Mr. Thomas, the station master, took his feet off the stove and put down his mug of tea. "What's this? The ghost train?" he laughed. "I didn't expect to see you again till after the snow." "Well, it's a bit of an emergency like," explained Jones. "Eli the baker is out of flour, Mr. Davis has no potatoes, and Mrs. Williams is dangerously low on bullseyes. We can't let the town starve, can we?" "Well, it's all waiting here for you," said Mr. Thomas. "I'll help you load up." There were 15 bags of flour, 5 of potatoes, nets of carrots, sprouts, onions and leeks, boxes of bullseyes and beef cubes, camphor, combs and caraway seeds, detergents and dolly mixture, embrocation, flannel nighties, grapefruit, hat pins, hair oil, honey, and so on, right through the alphabet. Also, there was Miss Figgin's old uncle, who had come to see the dentist 3 weeks ago and had had to stay ever since. They wrapped him in blankets and packed him in with the rest of the goods. "Mind how you go now, Ivor," said Mr. Thomas. "That's a heavy load you are pulling, look, and don't bump Mr. Figgin too much, or he'll have to come back for a new lot of teeth." The load was very heavy, and as they had cleared the line on the way down, Ivor pulled it with no trouble. They puffed merrily up the hill, through Tanny Gulch and down the hill beyond the tunnel. Then they saw trouble ahead. Where the line went close under the hill, the snow had slipped in an avalanche, and the line was blocked. "Take a run at it, Ivor!" shouted Jones. "We've plenty of weight behind us." Jones opened the regulator. "Oh!" went Ivor's whistle as he charged joyfully at the snow pile. Ivor had slammed on his brakes. He stopped inches from the snow pile. "What's wrong, Ivor?" laughed Jones. "Afraid of a bit of snow?" They backed off and charged again. Again, Ivor slammed on his brakes. "Now look here, Ivor," began Jones angrily because he had bumped his nose. "Just what do you—" He stopped. He'd seen something. The snow pile was not all snow. Some of it looked like wool. Jones saw a nose here, an ear and a tail there. He fetched his shovel. "Bah!" said the first sheep as he dug it out. Jones went on digging. He dug out, in all, 14 sheep. They were very cold and miserable, but they were unharmed. "Bah! Bah!" they shouted. "Yes, all right," said Jones, "but do be quiet a minute while we decide what to do with you." There was only one thing they could do, really. Take the sheep to Laniog and find out to whom they belonged. Jones unloaded all the goods, except Miss Figgin's uncle. Then he lifted the sheep into the trucks. "There'll be company for you, Mr. Figgin." "Ah," said the sheep, very pleased. "Ah," said Mr. Figgin, very displeased. "Boop, boop," went Ivor's whistle. They charged through what remained of the snow heap and headed for home. Everybody in Laniog was out to meet them. "Hooray for Jones the hero!" they shouted. "Hooray for Ivor!" Have you brought my flour? Shouted Eli. My potatoes? Shouted Mr. Davis. My bullseyes? Shouted Mrs. Williams. Nothing but sheep, shouted Eli angrily. Look, 2 truckloads of sheep, and if there is one thing we have plenty of in Llaniog, it is cold sheep. Dashed impertinence, muttered Mr. Figgin. Where's my dolly mixture? Wailed Mrs. Williams. Boop! Went Ivor's whistle so loudly that everybody had to stop shouting. Now, listen, everybody, said Jones's team. The goods are a mile or so back down the line. We just unload the sheep and go back for them. All right? They lifted down the sheep and Mr. Figgin, who was still bleating. Jones and Ivor went back down the line, and Mr. Davis and Eli the baker came too, because Jones's team had lifted enough boxes and bags for one day. So the sheep came home. Mr. Davis got his potatoes, Mrs. Williams her bullseyes, and the next day Eli the baker made a batch of hot, fresh rolls for them all.